Anyway, so I'm not going to say that.
Ladies and gentlemen, audience, thank you very much for attending the meeting of April 11th of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
I keep forgetting to bring my laptop. No, that's the new way, new world order.
Okay. Tonight, our first order of business is going to be our vote to support a warrant concerning borrowing, spending and borrowing, maybe not in that order, but borrowing and spending for the next step in the sewering project for the Common. It's $1.5 million for a engineering design effort. And all of you have a copy in front of you of at least my understanding of the draft that will appear in the warrant, so you know what you're voting for here, because I just want to point out to you the various parts it contains. First of all, I'll just read it and then try to, if it's sort of obvious, that $1.5 million to be expended by the Board of Selectmen to pay costs of design to sewer the Littleton Common area, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount under the pursuant to MGL's Chapter 44, number 77, parentheses 7, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. So it's going to be a borrowing. The selectmen are authorized to determine and assess betterments upon all properties benefited by these improvements. In accordance with MGL Cop 44 of Chapter 20, the premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes authorized by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payments of the costs of the issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to pay project costs, and the amount authorized to be borrowed pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by the amount of any such premium so applied. Fancy way of saying, quite aside from the last part, which just indicates how the bond will be paid off, is this will be, this, as it were, debt. If we go forward beyond this with the sewering, there's going to be more borrowing, more funds acquired to keep going. It'll all be wrapped under one large borrowing, or a series of borrowings, all of which will be paid for by the betterment, usage, and other fees associated with those who actually use the sewer, who agree to use the sewer. So let's be clear, this is a self-paying over n number of years project.
And I think another point to keep in mind is that this particular borrowing, not necessarily all of the borrowing that will be done if this project moves forward, but this particular amount, the $1.5 million that we're voting on tonight, will be borrowed inside the levy, which means that it will not require a temporary increase in the tax rate to fund this particular borrowing article. That'll be done with the regular levy that we collect year in and year out. There is an opportunity cost by virtue of doing this inside the levy. That's $1.5 million that cannot be allocated for other purposes. But right now, the amount that we're asking to borrow is within the flow of the current tax rate.
So it needs a
two-thirds. That is
vote of
correct.
town meeting,
Right.
but then does not need
Correct.
a vote of a
Ballot.
a ballot vote.
That is
A
correct.
simple majority on the ballot is not required because it's inside the levy.
Right. So I wanted you to see what we are, I'm recommending to our committee, because it's actually in the master plan to go ahead with sewering, just as described. We have, to be blunt, no leg to stand on by disapproving it, but you have to vote how you feel as both either individuals or members of the committee. So I'd like to hear a motion to approve our support on the floor of the town meeting of May 7th of $1.5 million borrowing for the Littleton Common Sewer design.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Negative?
I'll abstain because I haven't read it. so.
Would you like some, I mean,
Go ahead, it's already passed, so that's fine.
right,
I just don't like to, we not like to vote on something haven't read, so.
okay. No, it's fine. Okay, I will make sure that the appropriate authorities in town know that we also, along with just every major committee, has supported this.
You gotta tell him
For-
Gary didn't, right?
What'd you say?
You gotta tell him Gary didn't, right?
didn't
I've
vote.
been
No, I
I've been
just-
holding this back after, because we're going to find out why I held this back, because I didn't want to jeopardize his success in front of the Board of Selectmen. No, I really would like to, even if, you should have stopped if you felt the flow was too, I thought you were very familiar with this.
In principle, but I've not dived into any of all the technical or specific requirements and stuff like that. I've not gone into the meetings, so
Okay.
I know in principle of it. I know why it's a good idea or why it's desired, but I don't know as much as I probably should.
Well, let me assure you, there's a whole website area devoted just to sewering.
I'm sure.
So, and it has a fair amount of, at least basic engineering in it.
Right.
So
I understand.
it'll be, and I believe that there have been several briefing meetings held by both the engineering firm and the Board of Selectmen
Oh,
subcommittee, so it's all out there.
I'm sure. I just honestly don't have my
Did
own
anybody go to
personal
the-
knowledge about it, so.
Did anybody go to, there was a big public hearing a few weeks ago.
I was at it,
Did
yep.
anybody go, what was the thrust of that? How did that strike anybody?
It was long and detailed, but informative. It talked about a lot of the things that Mike summarized in terms of how the betterment assessments will work, how the hookup fees will work, time frames. They went into the technical aspects of this particular sewering technology, and it was good. It was involved, and to Gary's point, this is a very large project. It's a very impactful project, not just in terms of the financial aspect of it, but if it happens, it will change a lot of what's going on around that area, both commercially and for some residents who are in that area. So it's definitely worth trying to keep abreast of it. It's a lot to get all the way around, but it's worthwhile.
What's the expected construction cost to be?
The total amount projected at this point, and apparently it's based on some models having to do with costs and how it gets paid for, is $36 million.
Okay.
And they believe approximately, I think the latest projection, no promises, no assurances, is approximately $4 million of that in the very near future could come from other sources, not necessarily from the town.
Like from the state.
So there basically would be state, there are other organizations that are very interested in promoting for communities such as Littleton, putting in basically what's called smart sewering, which is different than conventional
Right.
pipes, So,
And so it's going to be like if it came to the construction, then it would be, we'd front it and then be looking for money to be coming back from the betterment fees mainly? Or?
yes, and there's a schedule. I believe,
The betterments and the hookups.
hookups, and the use fees as well, that are based on usage.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing, the key facet to keep in mind about that is, it's not like we would be rolling the dice to assume that people were going to hook up. They will commit to hooking up and paying the betterment, or if they don't, if there isn't a critical mass of that, the project won't start, because there's no appetite on the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board for the town and the citizens and the tax flow to support it. There is a risk. I mean, there's no question that, they'll model the numbers and they'll try to say, okay, our projection right now is the whole thing is self-sufficient. It's going to be, covered by all the property owners. They've all said they're going to do it. But if properties get sold or, different things happen, then there's a probability, then that's what they're trying to figure out, that there might be some exposure to the town. The question is how much. But they're confident right now that all the information that they've gathered up to this point is that the property owners, and it makes sense, are in favor of it because it increases the value of their property. Whatever money they pay up front for the betterment and the hookup, they are fully expecting to get back some multiple of that, by virtue of selling the property, down the road, or having the ability to charge more rent for it if that's what they do, because there are more uses for it, and they can, attract a wider variety of tenant. So the people that are looking at this are optimistic that funding mechanism will hold up, but they won't move forward until they are sure. So the exposure to the town is there, but when you think about it on a probability basis, it's probably pretty low.
A good example of someone who would hook up and have a very profound positive effect on this would be the owners of the site on which the IBM facility is resting. The owners of that particular site are sitting on a current system that is frankly at the end of its life cycle. So it would make financial and practical sense and engineering sense for them to hook in, but they don't have to, okay? But if they step up, and as far as the point is concerned, the point is a newly constructed system. And although, as you might expect, the owner of the point, the person who put it together and still has financial responsibility for it, just put in a system to support n number of gallons of use there. And so it'll be at least 5 to 10 years before he would have any reason to want to hook up, but he could very well make his deposit now and get out of the, as it were, the sewage business. Nobody wants to be in the sewage business except municipal sites like us.
Okay.
One of the things that I would recommend to both of you, if you have an opportunity, is to go out to the website and watch the Q&A portion of the meeting, because there were questions requested on 3x5 cards that then were answered by Chase and others at that meeting. So that's a good portion of it if you wanted to just listen into what other folks' questions were and the answers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to move on now for our next agenda item, which is the update of member liaison activities. And in no particular order, Anna, you want to
Sure.
tell us who you've been?
So after multiple months of snow dates, I finally had an opportunity to go and meet with the PMBC, which is the Permanent Municipal Building Committee. Yes. And so those folks were meeting last Wednesday night, and Steve, Carl, Bob, and Daryl were the 4 members present. Steve is a liaison also with the Finance Committee, Daryl with the School Committee. So during that particular meeting, I was able to talk a little bit about what it is that the Master Plan Implementation Committee's role is. And so we then discussed their role, which is implementation and not policy. So they very much look to the Board of Selectmen for policy direction, and then they go ahead and implement. With the brand-new Space Needs Committee that has been formed, they have Steve as the liaison to that particular committee, and what they will do is, based off the recommendations from that particular committee, they will go ahead and implement, including bringing in the various vendors, consultants that would be working on any recommendations coming out of that committee. They do think that the Space Needs Committee will be focused on short-term fixes initially, and then take into account what it is that will happen on the long term. But they definitely feel that what we have right now in this building, there could be some short-term fixes until something, a bigger plan, if you will, can actually be put out there and accepted by residents. So as we discussed all of the work that they're doing and that our committee is doing, there definitely seem to be a couple of areas where we could continue to work together. They said that what they would like to do is understand what's in the master plan and the documentation behind it that relates specifically to what the town wants and how town hall fits into that. So if there is specific language, specific recommendations, they would like us to do a presentation to them identifying what it is that residents have already said, so that they can take that into advisement as well.
recall there being a lot of discussion necessarily on that subject.
Well, I'd be happy to take a look and see if there is anything specifically in some of the backup documents that are maybe not even a part of that. But you're right, I don't recall a lot of specific recommendations, but so.
The
I'd be happy to
library
go
was a
through
big
that.
common discussion of things, and I think that was related because of the adjacency of the
Right,
building, obviously.
exactly.
But nothing, I don't think there was a big groundswell of information or discussion regarding this, use of this space. Other than Elder Services did not have enough space.
Yep.
Council of Aging didn't have enough space.
So, and if that's the one thing that comes out of it, then, you know, that's a pretty easy report back.
And this, are you almost?
I have
finished?
one more item.
Oh, please, go.
Yeah.
Please, I'm
So
sorry.
the last one is that in return, if we happen to have, through our work, a request to understand existing town properties, they have done a lot of feasibility studies for various properties around town, and they would be happy to share those if we think that it would be important toward the work that we're doing for the revitalization of the common.
That would be a very valuable contribution, I think, coming up. Just as a side connection with what you were talking about, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, there was the opening of a discussion about construction at the beach at Long Lake of a facility that could serve, it sounded to me, semi-permanently for Parks and Recreation, to move there on a structure, a modest structure being built that would open up space at least for the council, well, for elder activities that are currently going on in this building. It would basically open up the space to do it. So they're going forward now with estimating, or trying to get estimates on the cost of that construction, and issues, of course, with sewage. That's one of the favorite places in town to deal with sewage. And so I just wanted to say that already there is activity associated with, and great interest shown by the Board of Selectmen in that prospect. That may be worth a recommendation or an event worth following. Thank you very much, Ed, for your persistence against weather. It's greatly appreciated. And we'll do a follow-up for sure on that. Gary?
I mentioned last month quickly that I had a chance to talk with Elizabeth Tretiak. She's the new head of Elder Services. She was just diving into the job. She's only been in the job for like a month or so. And I got a chance to explain the master plan to her. What was in it, I recommended that she take a look at it. That there were, I highlighted those things that related to her stead. We talked about some of the. I get very educated on some of the challenges they're dealing with there. We talked about how there was a lot of people commenting in the master plan about the desire to have a senior center of some kind, or a community center, and she said that space needs, that if you looked at whatever, she must have some kind of source for this kind of information, that we'd want to have a senior center that would be 4 to 6 square feet per number of 60-year-olds that you have in town, which equates to just 3,000 people that would meet that demographic or will be soon. So that gives you a sense of how big a need this is in the town, that we don't, that's 15,000 square feet of a space center. So that was educational for me as to just how big a demand is. Put it in quantified it a little bit to me. I mentioned to her some things that, some possibilities of where, she did not know about the library project. So I mentioned, well, if the library moved, that would seem to be like a space there, and I showed her around the library, because we were meeting in the library. Mentioned some other spaces that could be opening up in the near future as well. She also mentioned, though, that the majority of their time is spent scheduling the shuttle services that they have for the transportation for the seniors. That is most of the time that they spend is just coordinating and scheduling that activity, which to me was shocking. That's elder services. That is more than half of the time that they spend is just coordinating and arranging that service itself. That they have three active drivers, and then she has 2 workers and herself. And right now, one of the vans is out of commission, which is obviously hurting their abilities. They have a MART van as well. So they have limitations with what vehicles they have, and it's preponderance of the time is spent on doing this kind of thing. I brought up the idea that I will get to in a few minutes regarding the Transportation Council, that I was suggesting that they be part of, because, services is as much a part of the equation for transportation as infrastructure. And she said she didn't want to endorse or not endorse that idea, because her main concern was if she did something like that, she'd afraid that she's going to be given more things to do. In terms of like having more things to be responsible for without having the resources to necessarily accomplish them. Noted, fair. So she's still kind of in a fact-finding stage in terms of her position. But there's definitely a demand for more vehicles, more hours outside of the time that they offer it. And, if there was some kind of transportation department, that would be a wonderful thing, because it makes that if this town ever went to something like that, because that's mostly what they're doing. So I thought that was very interesting.
Did you get a chance in your discussion with her to, first of all, do you know what the source of funding specifically is for the shuttle service? Is that state? Is it federal? Is it local?
I
Or a
did
combination?
not ask the question.
Okay.
I
So,
think a lot of it is not local.
that's correct.
I think a lot of it is not town-funded. I think there are specific funds for federal or state funds for elderly services, which then get used for that purpose and
That
have
may-
certain requirements and so on.
That may be for the actual vehicles themselves, but I don't believe, but the time that they're spending arranging, coordinating it, I don't believe would.
Probably not. Maybe the drivers' salaries have some.
And a lot of the drivers are, 19 and a half hours a week to keep them under a threshold.
Yes, so they don't, they don't become candidates for benefits and
Yeah.
a whole bunch of, it's a tough system to operate. Mark, do you happen to know anything about the financing of that operation as a whole?
I don't know anything about it. I don't know if there's an agency for it or anything, no.
Okay.
So, based off of the staff that she has, those are paid staff to answer the phone calls and schedule the transportation. Does she use volunteers for that work as well, do you know?
I do not know. She does? Oh, okay.
Volunteers for the phones, a lot of volunteers. Really, I know she's trying to, I think they're trying to hire.
Could you, I know it's odd, but there's a rule, just state your name and address.
Gary Pickard, 160 Great Road, Littleton, Mass.
Okay, you're on the record. Thank you very much. All right.
But yes, she does use a lot of volunteers. That's basically what's running everything over there.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's important to know, yeah.
Did you come away with any recommendations from your visit, from your discussion with her about
Well,
what,
I mean-
what this committee should become aware of and maybe act on?
Well, I think we've heard from a lot of the outreach sessions that there's a high demand for some kind of a senior center. And we've heard that in town meetings as well, those who get frustrated that we fund other infrastructure, we keep pushing that one aside. And so I've mentioned that, and that's been, I've heard that before at town meetings and such. And we heard that in the master plan as well. And what was the other part of the question? You said, is there things that we should be aware of? Well, I mean, she's a trained social worker. And she's spending most of her time dealing with transportation services. And I think that is a disconnect. I would think that's not what the majority of her time should be providing. It is a social service that's being provided, but I think there's got to be other things that she should also be spending her time on equally, if not more importantly than that. That's my takeaway from it. Now, whether we can do something about that?
Well, I think it fits in very well with your other interest. I mean, I think it shows how important coordination of transportation can be and how crucial it is for that one segment, but that also
But
connects to a lot of other
It
segments
goes
in town.
to me, I take it as maybe that's not where that service should be residing. if that maybe that service should be centralized in some way, if it's not just for not necessarily sitting on her lap. Not necessarily the best fit for that.
Okay. Yeah, I just wonder, I mean, the reason I ask about the source of the funding for that, it could very well be there is a connection, a requirement that goes along with the funding about who can administer it and how it gets controlled. So there may be a bureaucratic, I'll call it a bureaucratic structure that forecloses how much the town can come in or how much another agency can come in and start taking stuff over, even though the cause is worthy. I mean, I don't disagree with any of this. It's just that it'll, I think maybe the first order of business, and if you want to follow up, it's fine, to find out a little bit more about the source of funding, how much, the control and command part of it.
Well, what I actually might be, because I think this is not just, well, I'm focusing on the transportation pieces of things, but I think
Yeah.
this touches a lot of different other areas, in my opinion, besides transportation, social services, the community well-being aspect of the town, and stuff like that. Maybe what I would suggest is that when she feels she's got a better handle on the job and what she's got on her plate and has a chance to look at the master plan, maybe we can have her come in and talk about some of the challenges that she sees and see if there's things in the master plan that might be of interest that maybe we could help with.
Okay.
Instead of me muddling the translation from her to bringing it back here.
No, well, I'm also looking at your timeline on the committee, and I was trying to make use of your expertise before you've got apparently a discussion going with the Council on Aging head, so I was frankly trying to deploy it. But
Yeah,
okay.
I asked her, no, I think she's still in the fact-finding stage at this point,
Okay.
so, but I would like to at least put it out there, that if you're okay with it, to offer her up that if she wants to use this as a forum to discuss some of these things, and so we could all kind of hear some of those issues that she had.
Is there any further discussion? Is there anything that would suggest that we do want to do this or don't want to do it? Mark?
I don't think it's a great place to bring her into it. Housing's not gonna be just for the elderly, with
Yep.
a lot of residents in the town of Littleton need transportation.
Yep.
I meant to say transportation.
Yeah, I think really that this fits precisely into what Gary's been doing with transportation, and I think it shows the important needs that we have, and maybe this could be fit in with transportation not only for the elderly, but other transportation as well, and see how that could operate. So, yeah, I think this is a very important issue.
I think anything that touches on the master plan, this is a terrific forum for it.
Okay.
I would never consider it a waste of time to hear it.
Good.
I don't know how, there are times where we might not find actionable tasks from having heard it, but that doesn't mean it was a waste of time at all, so.
Well, I'm looking for a place in transportation where actually something could, quote, actionable could be done. It doesn't necessarily, the experience that they're having with routing is sort of a preview of what the town would have to address if we started taking seriously moving people from the train station to the common or wherever we'd like to move them to. So to make those centers viable. So the experiences that they're having are not there. I realize it's different. They have a wider net that they've got to go out on, but nonetheless, the whole logistics setup, everything else about it, they're the only one in town with actual hands-on experience with this. And that, I don't want to lose that institutional knowledge without letting it drift off. Into
Like I said, I know we're talking about transportation, and I said that takes a lot of the time, but there's a lot of needs to deal with that
Yeah.
I think is on Elizabeth's plate.
Yeah.
That deals with future space need planning,
Yeah.
that deals with the actual services that are being provided to the elderly, the adequacy of the space that we have right now. I mean, we just talked about with the building committee. I think that, whatever, there's 9 elements in this master plan. I wouldn't be surprised if there's half a dozen of them that relate to stuff that she touches directly or indirectly. So, and housing as well, senior housing. So, yeah, I'll let her know that the invitation's out there if she wants to meet with us when she feels compelled to do so. Feels that she has the time to do.
Yeah, I'll make it my business to invite her periodically. When she's ready, she can come in. So,
Okay.
if she doesn't volunteer to come in, I'll make sure that I'll come over and invite her. Or
Okay.
send our ambassador over to invite her. Right, Mary? No. Okay.
You just got recruited. You just got recruited.
That's okay. Hey, I'm in and out, what can I say?
Okay, so the other news was the selectmen's meeting on Monday. Very happy that the selectmen voted to endorse the proposal to create a town transportation advisory council with some minor modifications to the charter that I had proposed. They recommended that we added someone from the disability, is that the right term, Disability Commission, to the charter, to the council, and we adjusted the at-large members from 3 to 1. So that provides 7 spaces. So the general response was, hey, it's worth giving it a shot and see how this works. And it's anything that supports further advancing the master plan is worth trying to move forward. And we did get some participation at the meeting from Ed Mullen from the planning board. He spoke and said he thinks this is a good idea and was looking forward to being on this council. And Vanessa, I believe, from the Mpic was there as well to support that. So that was encouraging.
I also want to report, I got an email from Chief Bergman, the town administrator, today, basically reporting the fact that the Board of Selectmen formally have advanced the formation of the Advisory Council for Transportation in the town. So it's a done deal, as they voted the other night. And I also want to say that Gary did a great job in presenting very quickly and easily. His expertise came through, and you're now looking at one of Littleton's newest and probably best transportation czar. So, welcome aboard. You're now a czar.
Except we don't have a czar.
Oh, we have a czar now. Well done, Gary. Thank you very much on behalf of our committee.
Thank you. Glad to make that accomplishment.
So that means half of this master plan
It's yours. Yeah, right. We're implementing it away. Yes, here we go.
Will there be a call for volunteers for that? I guess now only one, but one.
Yes. So the email that Mike's referring to there's a note to the different parties that are now expected to contribute a member, actually a member and an alternate, to the Transportation Council, saying, hey, you need to put somebody up. And then say for the at-large, I guess June's the cycle when they often recruit for new positions, and so they would be recruiting for that at that time.
Okay, I'll make my presentation very brief. I've been working and has been present also for that, but I've been traveling around with the folks from the Sewering Subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen for a couple of reasons. First of all, to keep track of the sewering activity, and also to go to school to understand how folks who own property, operate businesses there, and property owners who are absent in the common react to opportunities, how to approach, basically trying to learn this in connection with the effort that we're going to be having. The Soaring Group obviously is pursuing the largest potential consumers of water, and therefore the largest users of the proposed sewage system. And they've used various methods to try to reach out. Not one of them works as well. They all work in combination, more or less. The response to the opportunity to hook up has been very slow, but it eventually did develop into generally a very positive response. That is, most of the major property owners and many property owners, not all, are agreeing to show a strong interest in hooking up. What was very interesting to me is that the significance of what they could do with their property if they were hooked up is not yet, shall we, hit them. Because when asked if this is going to change your business in any shape or way, a majority say no. But in fact, it should, and it would under ordinary circumstances. And I've gone to other towns, both inside Massachusetts and out, and asked folks who've done this kind of infrastructure improvement, not necessarily a smart sewer, but something akin to a sewage system, improving a center with key infrastructure. And what's interesting is that in most cases, the most success you see when the businesses themselves have been clamoring before the town does for that infrastructure. So we have a situation where the town is more interested, more energized, and also we, along what we'll call what constitutes the sewering district, we have quite a number of private residences who look at the world in a different way, and no one can force them to change. So the real issue here is, as we get closer and closer to decision time, how most of the, as it were, property owners who are absentee owners, as it were, they don't operate businesses there, respond. So in that sense, progress is being made, is still very, very positive, but it's not, as it were, it's not unanimous across the board. Not everybody in the Commons is going to hook up to the sewering system. It's going to have to be a process going on. And what may make it work is the decision made by the Board of Selectmen that if you don't opt in, that is, if you don't pay the, as it were, the fee to be hooked up, don't commit yourself financially, the opportunity passes you by permanently. Okay.
Was there a break between those who were ambivalent versus those who were enthusiastic?
It's not complete. They're still doing they're still meeting
Okay.
with people. I mean, that's, the other thing I learned is that we're going to have to, in our process, think of a systematic way to approach property owners and residents, regardless of their interest. Energize them more to come out. We're going to have to reach out
Okay.
differently, or more. Also, we're working on, hopefully, in a longer timeline, so we don't have to do it compressed the way the Board of Selectmen has been more or less forced to do it. They've had relatively little time to do this. I mean, they're looking at a bond float for $1.5 million on May the 7th, and they started this effort to really do the enlisting just a few months ago. So we won't have that onus. We'll be looking further out. Which brings me now to item number 3. I wanted
Mike,
to,
before you
please.
go on, could I
Sure.
just say, I forgot to put my thing in here. I have been in touch with the space needs, the
Thank you.
open space, open space
Yes.
committee.
Okay.
The point about them is that they haven't met much. Let's say they haven't hardly met at all. What they did do before they stopped sort of meeting was to prepare a draft, sort of a checklist of how how you decide whether an open space parcel is worth acquiring or not. And they were, they had a bunch of different criteria, but they never finalized this, and then they haven't met. So I didn't think to present that to us because it isn't anything that really exists. Would there be some sense, I don't know whether we could do it or somebody could do it, to sort of encourage them to finalize that, because I think it's the kind of thing that we probably think is a good thing to have when the town comes to think about what properties might be worth acquiring and what wouldn't be worth acquiring.
Okay.
So that's what I got from that. I have a copy of that. If anybody wants to see it, I could.
The rough draft of their
Yeah.
criteria, okay. All right. I'll make a comment here because we have people at our table who have lots of experience with this. I want to suggest that what you're describing is tailor-made for a number of different organizations that have the expertise. The one that leaps to mind immediately is the planning board as a planning site. I'm not trying to pass off of work. I'm just
No, I hear you.
okay? Because establishing criteria for purchase is a very technical, professional, and if I could use the word in the most elegant sense, political decisions that a board, any group of people could make. And I think it ought to be a committee with statutory power. So, in other words, someone who basically gets elected in the position and has financial responsibility. And the reason, and also has a title that says, we're in the business of planning. For example, such questions as where do the funds come from? Once you have established the criteria, whatever they are, another practical question would be where the funds come from in order to make such purchases, whether it's for open space and its close companion, certain kinds of housing at different price points for people. I'm just, they said it would go together. But that's a planning decision, not a,
I think you're right, but unfortunately, it doesn't normally fall into our laps. Most of the time, the selectmen are involved in it. Case in point, Cooper Farms, Cricket Lane, those kind of things. Properties that probably should have been on our radar screens a long time ago to purchase. We don't get them, we don't see them until a developer's coming in and knocking on the door and saying, we want to buy this property. Makes sense. And we do have funding. We have money. We still have cell tower money. We still have CPC money. We're trying to do, as from a planning board standpoint, what we can with the open space subdivisions that we have to get more open space, more usable open space every chance we get from every subdivision. But as far as buying the big ones, we need to have a list. We need to have it on our radar screen and be cognizant of when they're becoming available and how to buy them.
Yeah, I think the way it's been working, mostly has been probably the Conservation Trust that really puts it on the radar most. And since we have CPC, CPA funding, that's where the money comes from. Originally there was this big pot from the cell towers, and now that's folded into CPC money. So that's a lot of where if you where the funding comes from is really that. And so there's whether it should be more, Mike, I don't know whether it should be more centralized to something. Maybe there should be a number of boards that work together on this. But certainly, the way it stands now is that it's largely, the funding is largely CPC funding now that we have that. And the sort of the figuring out what's available and so on tends to be, I think, mostly the Conservation Trust, really more than anybody else. And correct me if I'm wrong about that. And then, as you say, the selectmen, they bring it to the selectmen, and then the selectmen go forward with that.
do you have any comments, Anna?
I think it never starts with us. It's always somebody else. It's either another agency or the selectmen or something. It never starts with the planning board. And I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong. It's just how it goes.
Well, I guess sorry, go ahead.
I think part of the thing is, because I was struck when I went to see I think some people know this very well, and it's just my ignorance that I didn't, that when I went to talk to the Conservation Commission, that it turned out that mostly the Conservation Commission is concerned with permitting. And they don't look at these kind of things much. That really the people who look at those kind of issues about open space acquisition and things like that is really much more the Conservation Trust, which, was a private body, but then they have to bring it to the town. They do a lot of the sort of legwork, sometimes putting their own money into hiring lawyers or something like that for preparing plans or something like that, and then they bring it to the town, and then somebody brings it to the CPC for funding.
Who is the source of funding? This may seem like off track, but it is. I apologize ahead. Who is responsible for the funding or proposed funding for the Robinson Street, I'm going to call it the 1673 house?
Which probably is later, but anyway. That would be CPC.
Okay, all right.
Since we have those funds, they have four, it used to be three, now four pots that, CPA funding can be used for. One of them is public housing, one of them is open space acquisition, one of them is historic preservation, and one of them is recreational installations. And I think there's going to be a big amount that's going to go for recreation right now. But, they're the ones that have money for those kind of things, and where in the past, maybe the selectmen would have decided on some other sources. Now that's the source that's used for all of this. And then you have to say also that Bonnie is very ingenious in figuring out how you can sometimes what shall we say, use that money to get a lot more money or things like that. I mean, or, how that money can be leveraged, I guess would be the best way to put it.
So I think, going back to the topic of open space, I think the one element that is probably going to require much more intentionality is going to be either from the Board of Selectmen or from the Planning Board to have the upfront discussions with folks around open space in terms of what properties would ideally be something that the town would be interested in the future, or perhaps something that being able to at least have those identified would be the good start, and then having either of those two boards really step in and be intentional about making it known that when the time comes, it would be fabulous to be able to participate in owning those properties, or something like that. But right now, it sounds like it doesn't really exist.
No, we don't have a laundry list of where we'd like to buy if they became available.
Right. So being able to be proactive about that.
No, most of the time we get it when there's a danger that a developer's coming in and is going to buy it, and town gets the,
Yeah, it's very reactive.
yeah.
There was a discussion in the master plan about a corridor study as a means to start that process. So, and I forget who they identified as the party that would start that activity.
Anything in there, we're the party that starts.
Yeah, I guess so, but, we
Yeah.
can advocate others to do it, though.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the Great Road
we can
Corridor
certainly do
Study.
that. Yeah, the corridor study is in there.
It's one of the first 8.
Yeah. Mike, do you have any comment?
No, I mean, there's been plenty of talk over many years about, prioritizing. Ultimately, prioritizing the list would be a worthwhile exercise as long as everyone that's going into it realizes that acquiring all of the properties is probably not feasible. The cost would be just too much. The impact on our ability as a town to provide services or do other projects would be significantly impacted. So, but if the goal is to not be reactive and to try to be proactive so that, if we do, if we're able to prioritize, then we know that parcels 1, 2, and 3, whatever they are the ones we really go after. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are, gee, if we get lucky, we're gonna get them. And 8, 9, and 10, forget about it. It's just never gonna happen, and we're all gonna have to live with it. Now we know, and we can plan accordingly, both, whether we're abutters or whether we're, the people trying to come up with the money or the funding strategies or things like that. And then the other thing that is, at some point, is going to have to factor into that type of analysis is when, if ever, are we willing to go outside the levy to do these things? We haven't gone outside the levy to finance any kind of project for quite a while. We've had the luxury of the planning that we've done and the scope of the projects that we've done, because we've had debt coming off the books, to replace that with other projects. If we're talking about going out and buying multiple pieces of property in fairly short order, whether that's 2 years to 5 years, funding that inside the levy, again, unless you're in you have to make a determination about, as a town, whether or not you're truly willing to do that. Because if you're not, admit it now, because that changes the way you prioritize things and changes the potential outcomes. So when we talk about, let's identify the properties and prioritize on that, that's one aspect of it. But another aspect is, what's our strategy for acquiring them?
Right.
What are we willing to do or not do? Because until you've answered that question, it's just a nice list to look at and really doesn't have any meaning, at least in my mind, or has
Well,
minimal meaning.
And Mike, what you just said, I think also has bearing on one of our top 7 around being able to actually identify in our financial planning for the next 13 years where that timeframe would really come into to work on that. So it does all work together.
There's another piece of this, and I agree with Mike's, shall we say, analysis which to me gets to the core of the thing. What has interested me for quite some time, and this is in connection, part inspired what I've heard, and it's been reinforced tonight, is going outside the levy and doing at least a one-time assessment of all property owners, all taxpayers, so that we have basically a town fund of approximately $3.5 million that we start, in other words, basically go outside the levy and on a one-time basis raise $3.5 million.
You want a kitty.
That is correct. And because to him that hath still more shall be given. I think the $3.5 million fund becomes very attractive for others now to join in, and you quote, smaller amounts, whatever. The other piece of this is that the pursuit of open space is a piece of also of what I will call, the town is for people, it's for housing as well. They go together. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Bless you.
So it's the lack of coordination of use of open space or the ability to acquire it has been hampered by the lack of, frankly, as you were alluding to, we don't go outside the levy to do it. We say we want it, but we don't go outside to do it. And that either says we're not that interested in spending money on open space, or we're looking at open spaces as being isolated and not part of an overall, where are we going?
I don't
Go ahead.
see that as,
Go ahead.
I think we've done a heck of a good job to procure open space. We've got
Oh, there's no question that we've done, yeah,
and
absolutely.
we've done it
yeah.
without going outside the levy because we've had all that cell tower money. We've had the CPC funds. We've had it. We've been proactive as far as funding it goes. We haven't been proactive as far as reaching out before developers get to it. You know, we're always second to the dance. But we have a lot of open space.
We
We've
do,
done.
but the issue is that if you're gonna accelerate, which is what some of the public sentiment I hear and feel is, what we've been able to do because we've only been able to do that much because we made a concerted effort to stay inside the levy and use those alternative funding sources, which I don't disagree with at all. But we all have to realize that if you come up with 10 more parcels and you're like, I want all 10,
Oh yeah, of course.
it's
you
never going to work.
Right.
It's, unless you get lucky and those parcels stay on the market long enough that your cycle of CPC, all that kind of stuff, it gets re-energized, refilled, and you might get lucky. You might say, well, the probability of getting 3 or 4 is high, the probability of getting 6 or 7 is lower, and the probability of getting 10 is almost 0. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. You could get lucky. But that's what's going to happen. We're going to have to be willing to get lucky instead of making our own luck by raising taxes and spending it.
But at this point, we even need to start with those 1 through 3 on
Right.
the list.
I agree.
I'm sorry, you're thinking we should have the list?
Oh, yeah, we should have the list, there's no question. But I'm just saying that the list in and of itself would be meaningful and beneficial to a degree, but without coming up with funding strategies and acknowledgments of what we're willing to tolerate, if you do those things too, now you have something
It
even
all
more
has to work
valuable,
together.
even more meaningful.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying.
Excuse me, let me move then quickly to item number 4, so because next steps for us. Because I want to ask this question, maybe it's premature, that the master plan has been out we're coming up to a year. And we've been making our rounds and promoting and guiding, and I'm looking at it, what I call a refresh. And I'm trying to get a sense from our table here of whether or not we are ready for what we'll call a refresh. And what I mean by that is taking a look at the master plan and asking ourselves, should we engage, if we should, engage the public soon? I don't mean, in the next 4 months, but soon, and open up this among other topics.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Okay? And also perhaps put it together with, and I only mention this not to provide balance, but because that's what a town is about. It's about open space and housing. And they're not the same. They'll never be in balance. They're opposed to each other. They're not the same. And we have to come face that reality. If you take up open space and build houses on it, that's not open space anymore. Okay? If you leave open space as open space, it affects the quality of life in town, but you don't have houses there. So I'm asking whether or not there's an interest in a committee, not interest, but basically an agreement that it's refresh time for us, and this ought to be one of the areas that needs to be, as it were, refreshed. It already is in the master plan. We don't have to invent the wheel here. It's a question of re-energizing, refreshing the community on something that is important to them as expressed in the master plan, but coming at it from a fresh point of view. including going outside, asking, should we go outside the levy to do these things?
How are you proposing to do that?
The same way we did the master plan, we actually begin bringing people in and asking them
Okay.
the question straight. I mean, I've just begun looking at this, but this one has been top of my list.
Well, I was,
And I don't want to get ahead of what we have to do tonight, but.
yeah, so I was just
Please.
wondering, I think when we started talking about this, we talked about giving ourselves a scorecard on a regular basis to see, like, how we're doing with, or not how we, I mean, we collectively,
Sure,
not just,
sure,
just 6 people here, but the town is doing and implementing some of the things. We know that it's not just a book on a shelf, there's things happening with it.
Yeah.
And I think it would be, it goes to what you're talking about, that if we would put it out there that says, these are some of the accomplishments, put something out in the press, maybe even take a few minutes at the town meeting,
Mhm.
and said, hey, this has been done, this has been done, this has been done, we're making progress. People can like, no, this is not just, we didn't just do this and it's not just idle. These are things that we've done or seen happen going forward for outer housing, for the transportation council, there's the common study, the common council, there's a bunch of stuff we can say, hey, it's good, but we're not stopping. So we could,
Yeah.
that could be like the trumpet that says, here's what we're doing, but here, what do you think our next wave should be?
Okay, in other words, you're saying, okay, because in the report for 2017,
Yeah,
the list you just provided that actually occurred in 2017.
calendar year.
The town year, I already put in a lot of the things that you
In the
mentioned.
annual report, okay.
Yeah, the annual report, which is always lacking.
Yeah.
So now we're coming to 2018, and we start a new calendar, so, it's not necessarily fresh, some of them, but yours, for example, the transportation czar formation, for example, the advisory committee, I noted that we got it started, but it's going to be in the 2018 report is actually achieved.
Yeah, but who reads the report? So I'm saying, but if we have,
No,
if we
I
get out there
understand.
with
Yeah,
in front of the
I-
town, maybe just to talk about some of the things that we've.
I've asked for and have gotten some minutes on the town to introduce the consultant, and I want to blow our horn about what we've done, what the town has done.
The town has done. Yes.
Not us, but what the town has done. Let me make it clear, it's the town committees, master plan committee, the finance committee, the board of selectmen especially. I mean, the committees in town have really come through by and large and done a lot of work.
Yeah, I think it's worth
Blowing out their
patting
horn about,
ourselves in the
yeah.
back there.
Yeah.
Well, to your question, I would like to say that, looking at what's next, I think we should do that starting July. I think from now until July, we probably have a lot just to even be able to bring the consultant on board and get that whole process started.
Yeah, I mean, the common's going to occupy us for a few more months to focus, or at least.
Yeah, get the ball rolling
Yeah,
on that
I'll,
one.
I'll
But,
give you- yeah.
but I think open space is a good topic. Looking at that corridor study is probably the first step, because that seems to be an area of particular focus in the town, and it ties right to the corridor study, and no one, I look at who was identified in the implementation program, it was planning board and board of selectmen, but as Mark mentioned, neither one of them are gonna get that started. Similar to the common study, it's probably on us to kind of
Yes.
put something out there with
Yeah.
their
I think you're
endorsement.
right.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not
Agree,
expecting
yeah.
to hand off anything just by saying here. I mean, that never works. But I think the suggestion made of starting in July, I think we have a lot more work and discussion to do here. So, does that mean, Gary, you're going to stay on? Just checking. All right. I want to go to item 3, if it's all right with give you an update on and give the town an update on what we've done so far with the consultant. We're now at the point where Fort Point emerged as the choice of our committee, and I've been in discussions with them as charged by this committee to negotiate the terms and conditions of the contract, and we have agreed on a price after some toing and froing, and fortunately, the planning board saw fit at the request to provide us an additional $10,000 from the that was, shall we say, there for implementation of the master plan. That has been added to our budget so that we'll be able to meet the projected costs of the consulting operation, which is $140,000, of which 130 is accounted for by the 80 provided by the town in the town meeting of 2017, and the 50 that we're able to get, having won in a grant proposal competition from the state. So between those monies, we're able to do that, and also have funds available for administrative assistance as we move forward. And by the way, Maren is somewhere, hopefully not in the Grand Canyon, but near it as we speak. So the Fort Point people are very excited to come on board. They've been very cooperative, very forthcoming about dealing with us. The program manager, Julie Conroy, has been very attentive to responding to our requests for changes in the cost proposal. It only took about 4 or 5 business days to pound out the arrangement with her. It was made easier by the fact that there was some obvious additional padding in their proposal, so it was good. And just so you know, the other competitor offered up a proposal that was quite similar. So word must have gotten out, but about what the original what the price was going to be. What I'm trying to do is to make sure that the funds that are available to us are not totally expended on one consulting operation. Not only I'm looking for ways to conserve the funds from this, I'm not doing the job to save money. I want to just make sure it got spent well. So with the help of Anna, we're working through a pay formula that allows us to monitor as closely as possible without interfering with the high quality of work that we expect from them. A payment schedule for, shall we say, making sure they meet their goals. So it's going to be based primarily on deliverables. And since what we've got is pretty well, shall we say, rather graphic, both in the RFP and in their response, it shouldn't be that difficult. So I've been in touch with town council, just so that you know. We already have the basic text in place. The price has already been agreed upon. The work and the hourly costs have been agreed upon. It's a matter of how the various dollars get paid during the course of the year. So that's where that stands. So I'm hopeful by the town meeting time, I can announce that we actually have a done deal.
Great.
That's the target.
Thank you for taking the lead in that.
Okay. I'm going to skip next steps.
At that point, at what point will we meet with them, or will they meet with other people, or?
We'll probably meet with as many of them first as I can get in the room according to our schedule, because remember, we meet, that's different than their ability to meet. So they may even be more flexible than we are. Plus, I want to make sure we have a full complement of members who can stay on for the project, because we need that talent on board. Okay. Let me just say also that there is activity and interest being shown very close to the Taylor Foster Street rail station. Do I have that right? Mm-hmm. Do you want to make any comments about where that might stand, what we should be concerned about, Mark?
Well, we had Maureen talk to the state about availability of funds for that area, so we're trying to assess what's going on with that.
That is for expanding the parking?
Well, it's parking and that whole Nordblom piece over there about some potential development over there. We've had some interest from a developer for senior housing out there. We have a informal proposal out there, and we're just kind of ferreting through that as we look at a couple of other ones. But right now there is some interest at the railroad tracks for some sort of development.
Okay.
Would that be, in your opinion, would that be the best place for a senior housing, or would that be something that'd be more, what?
You don't want to put me on the spot, do you?
I'm just,
Why not?
to me,
You're here.
I'll give you my opinion. I would think
Yeah.
something that is more appealing for commuters, regular commuters, that would be something that would, to me, make more sense there, people regularly traveling into to the city.
I have to say I agree with you.
Okay, so let's ask this question.
Some seniors are actually interested in traveling into the city
Thank
too,
you.
but.
Thank you.
Right, but they don't want to live right next to a train.
On a daily basis.
Right, Mike?
Exactly.
Okay, so to be clear, okay. There's something called mixed use for a reason, okay? So, and I'm not sure, and I don't claim to be expertise, although I'm a member of the demographic, I don't know if all folks who are over the age of 60 necessarily want to live in a population where everybody is over age of 60. I just don't know that's the case. I think some of us like to live for at least 50 years around folks who never age. They always stay around 18 to 22. I've experienced it, and I can tell you it's fantastic. It's very good for you. But that's me, and others may have it. My point is, if you have a mixed use, where you have elderly housing mixed in with other kinds of housing and commercial activity near a station, you have a formula, not necessarily for something that satisfies everybody, but a very, very vibrant community. And it would be wonderful for Littleton. It would be maybe some fantasy, but it's possible. The other thing I'm very happy to say, and certainly this will be beyond my watch, is that the perks would suggest, the perks I'm referring to the quality of the land there, you could put sewering out there. Just want you to know.
Out over that.
Yeah, as long as you don't cross the tracks,
Oh.
okay? I think there's a rule against that.
I don't think they're gonna let you anyway.
Who's not gonna let me?
The MBTA is not gonna let you cross the tracks. You know,
No, I'm saying, I'm saying, on the other side,
Oh.
for sure. That's all, I'm saying is that there's more out there that could meet the eye. Okay, now we come to public input. It's, yes, from you. If you have any, it's fine, you don't have to force it.
Well, I think we do need a mixed living situation. I don't think putting all old people in one place is a good thing. Having been a nurse and dealt with the elderly a lot, they get very, very lonely. And if there's activity and young people and things of that sort, they do much better. And that's what I'm thinking at this point. I'm just learning about all of this right now, but, and.
So
I
are we,
have-
by the way.
Huh?
So are we.
I mean, I have heard about the one where they wanted to put stuff up towards Taylor Street, maybe assisted living, maybe then individual homes and stuff like that. I've heard that projection. And it could be very good, but you're gonna have to figure out the transportation piece. The transportation is killing people. You know,
When you say transportation, what do you mean? You mean they can't get within Littleton or get out of Littleton, or both?
eat both.
Both.
You know, but I mean, they need to be able to go to the grocery store. They need, and they may not have an automobile or someone who can take them. We have no taxis, we have nothing like that. And, they do need to have something to get around with, and some of them should not be driving. We all agree.
Yes.
So that's my thought.
But one of the things we're looking at, specifically in something like that, Foster Street area, is what they call age in place. We haven't had a proposal yet that addresses independent, assisted, memory care and things like that, because a lot of the seniors that have come to our meetings have talked about wanting to be at a place where they can age and go
Stay in place.
and stay where they are and use the different facilities that they need there as their needs change.
Right.
Some people don't want to live with 18-year-olds and watch them all day. They want to live with their friends and they want to age with their friends.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things
But
we're
it's a
trying to
choice.
yeah.
look at as well. A total facility that has all the components to it.
The other thing I'm mindful in this connection is that the elderly population in this town may expand for a relatively brief period of time, and then it will get smaller again, because the elderly population is supposed to get larger, and then it will shrink. because the generation behind them didn't have enough babies.
You're talking a
The
generation.
baby
Yeah.
boomers.
The baby, in other
What's
words.
your time, when you say a small
Well,
time
we're
frame,
gone
what's that, like 20 years?
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so not 5 years.
So
Yeah.
the baby
Yeah.
boomers are aging now, so they're gonna expand.
Yes, and then once they're,
Over
yeah,
the next 25 to 30 years,
yeah.
right?
But we're talking about projects that take sometimes that long to gestate. So what I'm concerned about is that we'll be building facilities, not for the population that will be needing them.
I
really.
disagree.
I thought it was very interesting to hear that there were only 75 people that graduated from the high school this year. That thing is mammoth. That building is huge.
Mhm.
You know, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to utilize everything in there.
What, at the high school?
Yeah.
We're trending up. It's not, 75 is an aberration. When I first got to Littleton, 80 was about the average. It trickled up closer to 100. It went down again. Now it's going to go up, and it's going to stay up over 100 probably for a while.
Okay.
But again, a while, and we've talked about this in school committee, is probably 5 to 10, 12 years, because the number of children available to go to school, that population, that age, is shrinking precipitously. The demographic trend is for school-age children to plummet over the next 12, 15 years, because baby boomers' kids didn't have as many kids as they did. So the idea of overbuilding is something you have to be cognizant of when you're thinking about, well, how do we deal with, because we are going up, we have seen an influx, you know, how do you deal with that without trading one set of problems for a different set of problems down the road? You know, and that's the struggle, finding that balance point it's just saying building another building is not the answer. It's not, because it's only an answer for a short term. And like you said, the gestation period is significant, the investment is significant, and then what do you do with it after? You know?
Well, I do think that if you don't address some of the issues we have with elder housing, you are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, that is
where
true.
People aren't gonna stay because they can't
Correct.
get what they need here.
That's
Well,
true.
they can't afford it.
Right.
They can't
That's
afford it.
very true.
But they'd like to stay in town because they have history, their friends here, they have a house here, but the network's not there for them.
The market forces are really powerful and at the moment working against them. I mean, it's really land costs as well as building costs in this state. And as Littleton has become, just by not being inside 128 and being where we are, we're not doing anything that special, I don't think, even though we are
We have a
special.
good school system, people wanna be here.
Yeah,
It's causing the prices to go up.
yeah, and also land costs are, you know,
Well, it costs everywhere, but it's worse in Littleton.
yeah. Anyway, so,
Right.
a lot to think about.
That's why we need planning.
Well, a different kind of
I
planning
am.
we've been doing, so that's why, all right. Unfortunately, I do not have copies of the minutes unless they were left in the archives by Maren.
Mine said they weren't available.
They were not available. Okay, so what I'd like to do tonight then finally is to, and thank you very much for your input,
You're welcome.
stimulating. Meeting schedule, our next meeting. And by that time, I'm hopeful that we will have far enough along in our discussion with the, yes.
Can I make a point that's totally out of order, but it won't take but a minute? As always,
Could you give me the topic of your out-of-order topic?
the commemoration celebration of Patriots Day in Littleton. As always, we celebrate Patriots Day on Patriots Day, April 19th, and we will be doing so again this year at Liberty Square at 7 o'clock in the evening, and I hope some of you will see fit to attend. If the weather's decent, it's a nice event. Last year, the weather was terrible, it was awful, but if the weather's decent, it's a nice event. We get the Boxborough Minutemen, we have a wreath laying, we have a few people talk, and it's nice. Just generally friendly and so on.
Are there any signs of any Littleton patriots?
In what sense? We're all patriots.
No, I'm talking about, we have Boxborough Patriots.
The Boxborough Minutemen.
Minutemen, all right? Do we have anything equivalent in Littleton?
We cooperate with them. Several members of the Boxborough Minutemen are actually from Littleton, including the ubiquitous, and I probably don't even have to say his name, because there's only one person who's ubiquitous with everything. Andrew San Marco, who is who is a member of the Boxborough Minutemen.
Good, okay.
And there's another man whose name I
That's
forget.
almost worth the price of admission right there. Okay. Okay.
Now, is it always on Patriots Day the 19th?
It's always on Patriots Day the 19th, so we do
The actual
not,
day,
Yeah.
not the third Monday.
not the Monday holiday,
Okay,
but
got
on the actual
I
Patriots
will put
Day.
it in my calendar forever. to
Forever to be, and that's why we also are good at that because we save money on signs. We don't have to buy new signs because we just put April 19th on them and we can use
That's a
them
good
every
New
year.
England Yankee frugal thing to do.
What you just said, Jonathan, is so frightening when you think about it. Okay. And just to remind folks, again, they're on the floor of the meeting for town meeting on May the 7th. Not only will the sewering come up, but also the idea of using funds for the purchase of the house on Robinson Street, on Robinson Road is coming up as well. All right, so meeting schedule. We generally try to have one meeting a month so that moves us to May. Is there a particular date? The town meeting is May the 7th, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So,
Yeah, the election is the 12th.
okay. So ideally, I would like to have this meeting the first, if we can, put it in the first week of May so that you can meet the consultant. However, if we can't do that, we're going to have to wait until after the town meeting, which then you'll see them for the first time. I would like you to have, I may have them come over, if we meet there during the first week of May, or during that week, come over regardless of their introduction to the town as a whole or not. But it's a good opportunity to do
So we're
that.
having them come out twice?
We're paying them a lot of money, so.
I would prefer not. I would prefer to just have them here once and do it and meet the committee for the kickoff meeting. They have to come up for a kickoff meeting anyway. They've already agreed to come to our town meeting gratis.
Okay.
I mean, it may cost me a dinner, but that's me. It's okay, it's part of the chairman's job. On the other hand, the other part of it is what books.
I have planning board May 3rd, that first Thursday.
So that takes the third out of the game. So we could move back to Tuesdays, is that right, Mike?
Yes, Tuesdays is fine with me.
All right. Tuesday, May 1st.
That's supposed to be the second meeting of the property owners regarding the sewer.
What time is that meeting?
I don't know.
You have it, is that the sewering committee or just you having a meeting? I'm
No,
sorry.
the sewering committee folks proposed that as a second date.
Okay, to meet with property owners on the 1st, all right. Are you available on the 1st?
Yeah.
Okay. Gary?
I can attend, yes.
Mike?
I can do the 1st.
Mark?
I can do the 1st.
All right.
What's wrong with the second?
Nothing as far as I'm concerned.
I can do the 2nd.
Can you do the 2nd?
I'd like to avoid that one. I have a kids event that night I'd like to attend.
Okay, moving along. The following week, I mean, I'd like to get a full house if we're going to bring the consultant here for a kickoff meeting. Go
Well,
ahead.
my point is that on the first, Paul Glavy may not be able to attend that meeting.
That's true, too.
Yeah.
She's right, you're right, Anna.
So how about then Tuesday, the 8th?
I'm out of town that week.
Yeah, I might be collecting a child from college.
Going in or coming out?
Gotta go get him, I gotta bring him back.
Okay, I just want to understand.
Try to get him not to come back, but it didn't work.
Okay, all right.
And I didn't change my address yet, so he knows where to find us.
And phone number.
No, does he still have your credit card? I think that.
That'll never, that's
Okay.
never gonna happen.
Thank you, Mary.
See you later.
See ya. The 9th.
Good night.
I'm still bargaining with you guys.
I'm out that week, so.
You're out that week entirely.
Yeah, I am, yes.
So you gotta go back to the first week and decide whether you want Anna to be there or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to get as many people, your meeting is indefinite,
But
the
Pete,
time?
Paul Glavy's not gonna be at that
All I'm
meeting
saying
either.
is that that's supposed to be the second meeting of
Right.
property owners for the sewer. So
Okay.
whether anybody here would like to attend that meeting.
Paul Glavely, in all likelihood, will
Probably.
attend that
Right,
meeting.
exactly.
All
So
right.
that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not even
Right.
saying I'm going, I'm
All
just,
right, well, what I want to do then is this, since it doesn't regard policy, we can, for us to meet, it's a kickoff meeting with Fort Point, that's what it would be about, okay? We don't have to schedule it, as long as you understand, I will keep you informed that when the thing is signed and everything is moving, so that we could schedule for May, but I'd like to do it ahead of time. Let's move now to the week of the 13th, or did I already, have you already nixed that?
No, you haven't talked about that one yet.
All right, the week of the 13th.
I can do Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
Okay, let's try the 15th. Is anybody here conflicted on the 15th of May?
What kind of day is that?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's say the 15th of May is our next meeting. Thank you very much, and that might work out just splendidly, gives me more time to beat the consultants over the head.
so one thing that we could say is for that meeting on the on the 1st, is if that meeting isn't held, we could do that instead.
Yeah. So, but we have to know in advance.
You didn't
what
get,
we're
we
doing.
get these guys notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You guys are coming from out of town.
yeah. All right, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All those in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Gary, how long are you gonna stay till?